First and Cam, we are back with another episode, our midweek betting episode where we preview our games. We are in week 7. I keep saying this every week, but the college football season is flying by. Some good matchups this weekend. We're getting into the meat of conference play. So let's start it off with Ohio State at Illinois, who opens up as a 14.5 point favorite on the road. Luke Altmaier, 12 TDs, 0 INTs, 1,573 yards. Julian Sayin, 13 touchdowns, 3 picks, 1,313 yards. I, well, one, this is the game where Luke Altmaier throws his first pick. And I think Ohio State jumps on Illinois early. Carnell Tate had 159 yards and a TD in the first half against Minnesota. I don't think that's going to be a repeat performance, but I do think Ohio State jumps out on Illinois really early, even on the road.
So you feel like there's no upset alert here. I would probably agree. What I would say is Illinois did handle USC in the trenches pretty good a couple weeks ago. And so I look to that as maybe a first to mid second quarter as kind of this being a back and forth punting game. Then I think Ohio State opens it up and probably wins by 17 to 20, covering that spread. So I do like Ohio State as well. I think that they have the most complete team in college football. I think Miami's the best team, but they might be the most complete. Sounds kind of weird, but I don't know that Illinois has the firepower on either side of the ball to take the ball away multiple times, which is probably what they need, or to score as rapidly as they're going to need to in that second half against Ohio State. Brian Hartline as the OC for Ohio State. He calls a pretty conservative game in the first half. We saw this against Washington as well, and kind of Texas. And then they start to open it up a bit more in the second half as they find their spots. And I expect the same thing, kind of a slow, boring Ohio State game the first quarter and a half, 2 quarters. Second half, they really gang up on them.
Yeah, and good point about Brian Hartline because I have a note about Julian saying how he is very accurate, but what's been the success for him, I think, is that Brian Hartline's made it really easy for him with a lot of
Hmm.
play action. They're
Hmm.
really good in the red zone, and obviously they have three running backs who they can count on. But what I look like, or what I'm looking at with Julian saying in the play action and what Brian Hartline's been able to scheme up for Ohio State is kind of what I would want to see Sarkisian do for Arch Manning, and that hasn't happened yet. I think Ohio State is clearly just a better team with a better offensive line. But if you look at the backfield, Bo Jackson, the freshman, who is looking like he's going to be RB1 for the rest of
Yeah.
the year, they, I mean, they've been running the rock really well this year. Bo Jackson's averaging 7.5 yards per carry. He's the first Ohio State freshman to run for 100 yards in back-to-back games in school history.
Wow.
Now, mind you,
Wow.
that was against Grambling in Ohio, but he also had 80 yards against Washington, only 63 against Minnesota, but we saw how that game went. And so, yeah, no upset alert from me. I think Ohio State easily covers this spread, and it's definitely going to be one of my best bets to take later on in this episode. So, in our second game of our upset alert episode, we have Alabama going to Mizzou. This game is at 11 o'clock kickoff, which I think that's definitely going to affect this game line a little bit. If you're talking about an upset alert 1 through 10, with 10 being the highest on the upset alert ranking, I would say this game is probably about a 7. And I know a lot of people are really riding high on the Bama train right now, and that's good. Mizzou undefeated hasn't really played that many teams, which definitely worries me. But Alabama's run defense is still really not where it's supposed to be. And then Mizzou has the best running back in the nation in me and Ahmad Hardy. I've been preaching that every single week. And Alabama, who's ranked 63rd in rush defense this week,
Hmm.
I could see a potential game where Alabama finally steps up to their competition and puts a real effort in to stop Ahmad Hardy. I think that's going to be their biggest focus. Pribula can run. Mizzou's obviously got a plethora of receivers that they love, but I think Mizzou has a chance with this game being at 11 o'clock, being at home. Now, Mizzou in the previous 5 meetings hadn't scored 20 points in either of those games. Most notably, last year they lost 34-0, which was a really bad game. And Mizzou coming off games or coming off UMass and then the bye, that's one of those things that kind of can worry me a little bit. And I think it's worrying a lot of Mizzou fans is, you play UMass, then you have a bye, and then you welcome in Alabama at home. That's a tough ask. And I really do think that's definitely going to stifle them a little bit. But if you're talking about upsets, especially upsets this weekend, I think I'm going to roll with Mizzou being high on that list.
I would agree with that. I think that there are two concerns that I have for Alabama. Number one, is the last time they played a true mobile quarterback, it got kind of weird, right? Tommy Castellanos did whatever he wanted to. That opened up everything for that offense. We actually haven't seen FSU be as good of a team except for when they played Bama that first week. So that's number one.
Yeah.
Number two is I don't see Alabama scoring a lot in the second half. The defense really tightens up, but they're not a second half offensive team, and that kind of worries me as well. As Mizzou figures out what Bama's trying to take away, maybe it's on the run game, maybe it's just an extra guy in the box for the quarterback or running back. Maybe start throwing the ball down the field to Coleman and things like that. I do fear that Alabama doesn't have that third gear on that offense. They're pretty good. Like they'll score 24 points, maybe 31 points, but they aren't getting to 40 against good competition. And I think Mizzou could really turn this game into a track meet. And I don't think Bama's ready for that. Kalen DeBoer is really good against ranked opponents in the SEC, so I can't put it past there. But I wouldn't be surprised if Eli Drinkowitz came out and if it was their second drive, they've already scored on the first one, they do a trick play and try to open the game up, 14-3, 14-0, and all of a sudden you got Bama on their heels and they're playing a game that they don't want to be playing. So I'm a bit concerned too. I don't think Bama's overlooking this game. I just think Mizzou has probably had this game plan in their pocket for 3 to 4 weeks, UMass week by week, and then preparing for this one.
That's a good point. My biggest concern is Mizzou secondary. I've mentioned it before. They only have three INTs on the season, and compared to what they've been playing this season, it
All
just
right.
doesn't really strike me as, oh, okay, this defense is elite, or this secondary has guys that you need to be worried about. Ty Simpson, the hottest quarterback in college football right now, has surged up into the Heisman rankings. I think he will have a good day against Mizzou's secondary, just depending on if they can run the ball a lot. Jam Miller, if he finally decides to get things going, it could be trouble for Mizzou. But if you look at Mizzou's wide receivers, I mean, you've got three guys and a tight end and Brett Norfleet who are real threats. And I don't think Bama's ever played a Mizzou team with this amount of threats on the field. Last year they had Luther Burden, they had Kevin Coleman last year, but it wasn't enough for Brady Cook and Mizzou to get things going at all. Obviously, they lost 34-0. Now, I would say Bama's probably better this year than they were last year. So that's definitely scary. You got Jeremy Bernard and Ryan Williams, who's having a down year, but he's always a threat to go over the middle and up top. So that's the one thing I'm going to be leaning on to kind of see is if Mizzou secondary can start the game off early. And like you said, Mizzou might need a trick play or two to kind of get the game a little funky in that first quarter because if this game is 7-0 Alabama after the first quarter, it's going to be a hard challenge for Mizzou to really get up points because if that's the case, that means Mizzou probably hasn't moved the ball past the 50 that much. And we've seen Mizzou really struggle against Alabama, just the intimidation factor alone. But I think this year could be different. I think Mizzou is on a real mission this year, not only to go undefeated, but to get to that SEC title game. And so I think Mizzou's going to bring it. 11 o'clock game, like I said, bright and early. That could stumble Alabama a little bit. Now, the line is 2.5. I think that's the closest you'll ever get from a
Mm.
Bama Mizzou game. So like I said, I'm not expecting Mizzou to win, but I definitely think that they have a chance, and that upset alert meter is running high for
I
me.
I agree. I think the best part about the Mizzou team is probably, besides the run game, that defensive line. And I think they have a
Yeah.
great chance at making Ty Simpson very uncomfortable, messing up the timing a bit. And we haven't seen Alabama run the ball very well. And so if the pass rush can get home and the run game doesn't get started, we could be looking at a game where Mizzou's up 21-10 at half, and everybody kind of shocked, like, is this the best team in the SEC? Is this the best offense in the SEC with paired with a really good defense? So upset alert's high, but Mizzou's 14 and they could easily be ranked in the top 10 right next to Alabama. So a lot closer, and I'm glad Vegas has the line where they do. I am still taking Alabama to win, but Mizzou is a definitely a formidable opponent, probably a top five SEC team right now.
Great point. Let's head to our next game. We have Indiana at Oregon. Oregon, who is favored by 7.5. If we're talking about upset alerts on this game, not very high for me. I think Oregon, 1 to 10, I'm going about a 4. I think Oregon at home handles this game and they take care of business early. Just with the wide receiver core, Decory Moore, Malik Benson, Gary Bryant, and then Kenyon Sadiq, who I think is an NFL tight end. And then you have Dante Moore versus Mendoza, who that could be a great QB battle. Mendoza might put up numbers and look great, but on paper, but I think this game gets out of hand early. The line is 7.5. If it was any higher, I probably would still take it. Indiana probably going to be really confident coming in this game because of their coach. But Oregon is just rolling right now, and if they have a really really impressive win, I could see them jumping Miami in the rankings just with the AP poll being as funky as it's been this year.
I don't mind that. For me, the upset alert meter is probably at a 9, 9.5.
Ooh.
I do think Indiana could walk in and beat Oregon. I don't look at I don't look at Penn State and Illinois any differently. I think they're about the same program. Quarterback that's okay, a team that's just all right, probably not finding their way, probably playing a little below that roster, but I think they're the same team. And I watched Indiana beat one of those teams by almost 50, and then
Mhm.
Oregon went to double overtime with Penn State. And so I don't look at the separation as being that great. Where I do think Oregon has a huge advantage is being at home, is being the 2 time zones away from Indiana, and so that's a long way to travel. That could be a thing. I don't think Oregon's secondary has been tested either. We saw Drew Aller throw the ball deep over them a couple times late in the fourth quarter, and that really opened up the game to where it went to overtime. I think Indiana has a great chance at exposing how bad that Oregon secondary could be. I think the pass rush is a little overrated as well. And I just wouldn't be surprised if this game was like a 17-17 in the third quarter kind of game where neither offense really gets it going. I just happen to think that Indiana probably is a little bit more versatile with their team, with their ground game and the way they pass the ball more than Oregon. This is probably the first real test for Oregon's offense, and I'm not sure they measure up. Give me Indiana to cover, and we'll talk about best bets, but I like them to win this game outright.
That's interesting. So you have Indiana, who's top five in the country in rush offense, and then you have Oregon, who's sitting at number 11. And now, while Oregon doesn't have a single running back in total yards per game, in like top 100, Noah Whittington, De'Aaron Hill, and Jaden Lamar, and Jordan Davison, who is the four-string running back who still gets carries. And then Indiana has two guys, no higher than ranked 64, Roman Hemby and Kalen Black. My thing is, against Iowa, they only combined for 124 yards.
Mm.
And Iowa, who we look at, has no offense. Now they have a great, I wouldn't say they're elite defensively, but their defense is just so much better than their offense that it is just the premier group of their team. I want to see Indiana against a real pass rush. You got um, Amari Washington and Bear Alexander. And then on the edge, you have Matayo Ugalele. Those are guys are all going to be first or second round draft picks. I don't think Indiana's faced anybody with that size and athleticism yet. Not to mention the receiving core that I mentioned. Not to mention that Dante Moore could be the best quarterback in the country. Oregon's defensive backs, who will be playing the best quarterback they will face all season, and Mendoza, it's going to be up to him to put the team on his back on offense this Saturday. I don't think that I don't think that Oregon's offense is going to have trouble against Indiana's defense. I think they could end up scoring a lot of points, which would force Mendoza to put the ball in the air. So we might see some errant throws or some bad passes or some strip sacks, something like that. I think Oregon mucks the game up physically, and they really just dominate in the trenches. And that's why I think this game will be a lot further in score than you do. So I'm going to take Oregon. I do think Indiana has a chance to make it interesting, but I don't think they have a chance to win this game. And that's
Yeah,
okay because Indiana can still be a good team and lose this game.
correct. And I think Indiana is probably a tier below Oregon when it comes to talent and the roster and kind of how, I mean, obviously the roster, but just in how they're put together. What I would say is, I think when you play against a quarterback who's probably the best in college football or one of the top two or three, that always gives you a shot to win. And so I look at that. I look at them having that scare against Iowa where it's like, hey, we won an ugly game. We did everything wrong and still won. When you have that kind of game early in the season, I think that helps you understand, like, hey, we can win when it's ugly and we can win when it's pretty. So we're ready for whatever. I happen to think that that's going to help them in this game. I don't know that Penn State is all that good of a football team. And if you take that game out of looking at Oregon, they haven't played anybody either. They really haven't played anybody who's ultra dynamic and who could threaten them in any real way. That's why I look at this similar to how we just talked about Mizzou not having playing a great schedule so far. Kind of look at Oregon as the same way. Penn State maybe a tad overrated, not even ranked anymore. And so Oregon has no ranked opponents on their schedule right now that they've played. I look at that as an Indiana strength. They have done that. They have played a tougher schedule, and they've been tested before. I think they're going to end up covering this game.
So, quick question before we move off this game. Who do you think has a higher upside, Mendoza or Moore?
I happen to think that Fernando Mendoza has a higher upside. His frame is he's 6'5", 220. 6'5", 6'6", 220, solid frame, big arm, very accurate. I happen to think that a guy like that who can also move a little bit tends to have a higher upside, a higher and more consistent upside. I do like Dante Moore a lot. I think that he doesn't get asked to do as much. I just think that the accuracy, the deep ball throwing, and then the placement of where the kid puts the footballs is just next level. And so for me, I look at Mendoza as being more like a Jared Goff type. And I know that if you're not super into football, you don't think that that's a great compliment, but I happen to think that he's probably on that level of thrower of the football. And so to me, he has the higher upside.
Interesting. My comp for Fernando Mendoza was Kirk Cousins. I think
Sure.
his skill set and kind of just the frame of how he looks is similar to that. Dante Moore, I would have to do more research on what his comp looks like. But if I was a GM drafting in the draft and I have the number one or number two overall pick, I'm probably going Mendoza just for the simple facts of what you said. And I think that he has to do more with less talent around him, and
Yep.
easily that makes him just the better prospect. So let's go down to Texas, Oklahoma, Red River rivalry. If we're talking about upset alert, and the spread's only 1.5, but if we're talking about upsets, I think the 1 to 10 meter on this one is about a 7 to 8 to me. And even if that is material, he doesn't play, which I don't think he will. Michael Hawkins, the backup, who last week went 14 for 24, 162 yards, 3 touchdowns against Kent State. Now, his offensive coordinator, Ben Arbuckle, said there's some things we need to clean up with his footwork. Some of the misses that he had were really bad, but he was on time and made decisions early, which he's going to need to do against Texas in that
Hmm.
rush. And this game really rides on Arch Manning. Texas fans, if there's one thing if they're not going to be competing for a national championship, then you better beat Oklahoma. And this could be a bounce back game for him. I know a lot of people have been harsh on Arch Manning. There's a lot of holes in this Texas team, as we saw against Florida. And for that alone, I think Oklahoma's pass rush is going to get to Arch Manning and make things really difficult. They're number one in dropback and rushing success rate. They have 10 tackles for loss per game, and 14 different guys have recorded a tackle for loss. So defensive coordinator is scheming up the right stuff. And if we're talking about the game moves too fast for Arch Manning, this is going to be another game where he's tested right at the line of scrimmage and he's going to have to make quick decisions. And when his guys are open, he's going to have to hit them because all these missed throws and these missed second and third down, this is what's killing Texas offense. And their defense can't really get much of a break. So I'm really leaning towards uh I'm really leaning towards Oklahoma this game. Last year it was 34-3 Texas. Oklahoma actually had benched Jackson Arnold prior to this game. Quinn Ewers got out to kind of a slower start and then was just marching Texas up and down the field. So I look for Oklahoma to have a revenge game this year. I would love to see Mateer play. It may not be smart for him to play based on really the rest of the season and his career going forward, but I do like Oklahoma upsetting Texas, even if you want to call it an upset at this point at 1.5.
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like Texas is still, well, they are favored by Vegas. And I just feel like they are still a better football team. I
Mhm.
just think Oklahoma has played better ball to the point of this game. Mateer being out is a huge one. I just don't see a backup going in and beating a Texas defense the way that they need to get beaten, which is on time and consistent. We saw what Florida was able to do. I don't know that Oklahoma has established the run the same way that Florida has. I don't know that Oklahoma has the same defense that Florida has as well. I think this is a game where if you're Texas, you look at it and you say, we lost to Ohio State. That's a better team than us. We lost to Florida. That is not a better team than us. They are not a better, have a better roster. There's not a better coach. Their quarterback, we'll see. But I just think that they lost to a team that's inferior. I think they know that. I think the game plan is to go out and play their style of football. And I just happen to think that Arch like gets right. I just see
I
Arch
would love
having
that.
a 275, a couple touchdown passes, maybe an INT in there, maybe he runs for one. I just think this is a game where he really pops and everybody kind of looks and says, okay, like sneakily the kid's in the top 10 in passing yards and sneakily he's kind of a Heisman favorite again. I think this is that game where he gets right. I think that he's played the best defense he's probably going to play all year. I have to really check their schedule coming up, but I like Texas's spot here. I think whether Mateer plays or not, Mateer's my Heisman pick preseason, but I happen to think that this is a game where Arch gets right, that offense gets right, and we look at Texas like, man, they're a threat. They're a one-loss SEC team. They can still have a shot at everything they want to.
That's a great pick. Let's dive over into our best bets of week 7. My betting record is 5-8. What is yours? You said you're 15-12.
15 and 12. Yep.
15-12, so you're doing a lot better than me. I'm going to go ahead and start my first one. And Tennessee over 40 and a half points against Arkansas. I
Mm.
do think they're going to cover, but my pick is going to be Tennessee over 40 and a half points. The thing with Arkansas, it's hilarious. Arkansas has given up 129 points in these three games against quality opponents,
Mhm.
while Tennessee is averaging 51 points per game. They haven't scored fewer than 41 points in a game this year, and that's including the game against Georgia. Arkansas's defense is terrible. They lost me some money against Notre Dame playing as bad as they did. I think it could be a repeat of how that game looked. I don't think Tennessee's defense is as good as Notre Dame's, but that game could get out of hand really early. So that's going to be my first pick of week 7 is Tennessee over 40 and a half.
That's interesting. Bobby Petrino being the head coach, bringing in some of his own staff and rejuvenating that doesn't scare you a little that this Arkansas team could be kind of a sleeper, that this could be a game where Tennessee maybe stumbles a little bit and Arkansas, it's a close game. Like, how do you read that?
I just think if you're talking about fresh blood in the building, that sounds good and it could bring in some new life and rejuvenate a lot of guys in the system. But you're playing against a Tennessee team that's trying to get back on track, and
Mm.
they really need to show that hey, our offense can't be messed with, and we're averaging all these points per game. It's not going to stop here. And Arkansas, who I mean, you're not changing any personnel. You might be able to change the coaching. The schemes might be a little bit different, but that same personnel that was getting run over and run through versus Notre Dame, it's the same kids lining up against Tennessee. So luckily for luckily for Tennessee or luckily for Arkansas, this game is at Arkansas, or actually this game is at Tennessee. I was gonna say this game is at Arkansas, but no, this game is actually at Tennessee, and for that, I think they get rattled early. Taylor Green is gonna have to be Superman for Arkansas to even stay in this game, and I just don't think that he's gonna do that against this Tennessee defense.
Fair enough. My first best bet of the week is going to be Georgia minus 3.5 at Auburn. I happen to think that Georgia is one of those teams that also needs to get right. There are a couple teams that we're going to look at picking against the spread or picking over unders, and they're going to take it personal after taking a loss. So give me Georgia to win on the road. I think Auburn, again, makes the game ugly. I just think that Georgia has a different gear than Auburn. I think everybody has the book out on Auburn. We got a bracket Cam Johnson, wide receiver there at Auburn, force them to run, stop the run, and they're going to punt the ball to us, and we can go do what we need to do. So I happen to think that that Georgia's probably going to run away with this one, probably a 7 to 10 point game. It'll probably be tight for the first 3 quarters, but the better team will prevail. And so that's going to be my first best bet is Georgia to cover on the road minus 3.5.
I like that one too. I'll go ahead and just give away that one. I have Georgia minus 3.5. I'm surprised that it's even that close.
Yeah.
Like I said, I 6.5, 7.5 on some of these games. If that line was 7.5 at Auburn, I wouldn't mind it. I
Yeah.
guess you're giving them a little bit of a fair shot at Jordan Hare. It's always a tough environment to play in, especially when they're welcoming in good opponents. So my next best bet will be Ohio State minus 14 and a half versus Illinois. Last week I had the Texas A&M 14 and a half over Mississippi State. You questioned it a little bit, but I didn't really waver. And this is another one I'm not going to waver from. Ohio State is just too dominant. I think they're on a mission this year. They got the quarterback figured out. The running back room is starting to get figured out with true freshman Bo Jackson. Obviously, one of the better wide receiver corps in the country, one of the better defenses in the country. And I think they're the best coach team in America, and that is including Ryan Day, Brian Hartline, all those guys over there on Ohio State. It just looks like one well-oiled machine. They'd be my pick right now to go back to back and win a national title. I think they go into Illinois really confident, early game, but I think Ohio State jumps on them early, and so I'm taking minus 14 and a half.
I don't mind that at all. Illinois is a good football team. Ohio State just is a really dominant football team. And I can't unsee what Indiana did to Illinois. I can't unsee what UCL or USC was able to do to them, even though they lost that game. Um, I like that pick too. I think Washington was a much more difficult test, and Ohio State blew them out of the water. And so I don't think there's any difference with them and Illinois. So I like that pick a lot. I'm going to trail you on Iowa State minus 2.5 at Colorado. I really like this. I think that Dion, and I love Deion Sanders as a coach. I happen to think that Iowa State understands that for them to get to the playoff, for them to get to the Big 12 championship, they have to win out. And so to me, I feel like they're on a mission. I don't know what Colorado's mission is. Is it a bowl game? Is it to maybe get in the game of being in the championship for the Big 12? I don't know if they have the talent on that team. I don't know why this line is so close, other than Iowa State's offense just kind of being a little stymie and their defense being hurt. But I'm going to take Iowa State to win that game and cover the 2.5 points. I think it's going to happen in kind of a big way.
That's a good one. Yeah, Iowa State -2.5 at Colorado. I couldn't tell you why this line is so close. Maybe there's an injury that we don't know about. The Colorado home field advantage just is not enough
Mm-mm.
for me to want to make that game or pick them for a money line. The next game I'm going with Florida at Texas A&M. I'm going Texas A&M -7.5. They won me some money last week, so I'm going back and winning again. Here's my thing on Florida. I think they played really well against Texas, but I think they played really well against Texas. They were at home. Things were going right. Their defense stifled a quarterback who hasn't gotten things going. Well, now they're playing a quarterback who has his weapons, has his O-line, and his defense is pretty well put together. Marcel Reed, I think he has a chance to run all over Florida. Casey Concepcion, Mario Craver, you've heard me talk about those guys for weeks now. I think those guys have a big game. One of those guys is going to go over 100 yards and exploit that secondary. Um, Ryan Wingo on Texas had a really long touchdown against Florida last week, and I was kind of surprised that not because Ryan Wingo, he's a speedster, he's got blazing speed, but the way he got behind that defense, a lot of times, even when Manning wasn't hitting him, it's kind of worrisome for me. I think Florida takes a step back. I think that team is not as good as they played against Texas, which might sound weird, and I think Texas A&M is still slowly kind of just having to prove its point to people week in and week out, and now they're set at number 5 in the AP poll. I think they only climb with another impressive win against Florida this week.
I agree with you. I picked against Texas A&M a couple times now, and it hasn't worked out for me. And so I'm going to take your side on this one. I will take Texas A&M to cover the 7.5. I also agree with you that Florida probably played the best football their roster is capable of playing against a not so good offensive Texas team. Texas A&M, the other Texas team, they're probably the best Texas team, and then Texas Tech is probably second, Texas is probably third. They protect the quarterback and they push the ball down the field with accuracy, and they have weapons with that they get the ball to. They also have a really good defense that can just turn the water off on you at any time. And we've seen what DJ Lagway will do against a good defense. And so I agree with you. I think Texas A&M has to continue to prove that they really are probably the best, if not second best team in the SEC. This is just another game for them to stamp that. And so I agree with you. Give me Texas A&M's -7.5.
USC favored 2.5 against Michigan. I don't really like this one at all. USC has shown us flashes of good offense, but their defense leaves a lot to be desired, especially that game against Illinois. I think Michigan's a way better team than Illinois. The rankings won't reflect that, but I think Bryce Underwood is finding his footing. I think those receivers are slowly starting to play a little bit better. And then their run game. I mean, with Justice Haynes, I think he's going to run all over USC. It's at USC, so they're giving USC the nod. It's USC's first primetime game at home against a solid opponent in a really long time. But give me Michigan, give me Bryce Underwood to go into Southern Cal and light it up, and they come out there with a W.
I actually had that one as a best bet of mine as well. I really like Michigan at this spot. Them being the underdog makes it even better of a pick. I would have picked Michigan -2.5, but then being +2.5 is just a freebie. What Illinois was able to do to USC was basically do whatever they wanted, move them out of the way, create running gaps, create time for the quarterback to hold the ball. Same thing. I just happen to think Michigan has a much more dynamic quarterback than Luke Altmaier, who can run it as well. And I don't know that I think USC is 1 year away from having the physicality, 1 year away from having the roster to compete at the highest level in the Big Ten. And so for that, I'm going to take Michigan. And I have Michigan as a sleeper to make the college football playoff and not losing any more games until they go up and play Ohio State, or Ohio State comes to them, whatever it is. But that'll be their last loss is Ohio State. So I like Michigan to win this game too. Next best bet I have is Texas -1.5 against Oklahoma. I just like Texas in this spot. I think they have found some pieces on that offense to get it going. I think they know they have to protect Arch. Oklahoma has a really good pass rush and a good defense. I just happen to think that they haven't played against somebody that can take advantage of that, of those secondary that maybe hasn't been as tested as maybe we would see. So they played Michigan pretty tight. I think Texas is a better team than Michigan, and that was a really close game with John Mateer. Now you're talking about a backup playing quarterback. I don't love this spot for Oklahoma, even though they're a really good football team. So I think they drop this one. I think Texas runs away with it. And we kind of get back on the Arch train and say, maybe he should leave after this year. Maybe he is a top 10 pick. I think this is a spot for him.
Wow. Wow. I would love for the storyline to come out of this game if Arch Manning is back on track, or the New York Times put out an article that said, "Is Arch Manning the first college football flop of the NIL era?" I
Right.
just think we went a little too far in the pendulum right there. And yeah, he's playing bad, but this Texas team has a lot of holes in it. And it's not the Texas team that we're used to seeing. It's definitely not a preseason number one overall type of team. And so for that, I'm giving the kid some grace. He's got some time to figure things out. And this could be the week that he really locks in and gets things going. Oklahoma with the backup quarterback, that's probably the worst case scenario going into this game
Mhm.
for them. We'll see how Michael Hawkins reacts to Texas speed on defense. I think he's definitely bound to throw one or two picks in that first half. And if one of those gets taken back for six, then you could just lights out for
Yeah,
this one.
it's over with. And Texas will need their crowd to really show up. I'm gonna rattle off three straight here. So we already talked about Indiana. I'm taking Indiana to win at Oregon. I'll take the 7.5 as well, but I'm gonna take Indiana to win on the road. I think they're a really good team. They're very disciplined. They kind of remind me of Iowa if Iowa also had an explosive offense. I see the same characteristics there. I'm going to take Bama on the road as well. I'm taking the road teams. Bama to win and cover that 2.5. I think it ends up being a 10 to 12 point game. I think DeBoer is also very aware of the spread. I think he's very aware of what he has to do to get his team positioned for the playoff. And then my last pick is a team very similar to Texas A&M. Is I'm going to take Notre Dame to cover 21.5. Would they host NC State? Notre Dame has to play against the spread as much as they have to play against their opponents. I saw what they did against Boise State. It was a
It's a great
21,
point.
and I like where Notre Dame is. I like the way that they're focused. I think NC State's a solid football team. I think Notre Dame has to score style points, and so I'm going to take them to win by 22.
That's a great pick. And knowing what Marcus Freeman and Notre Dame has to do to score and make the game look as ugly as possible, that's gonna mean something towards the end of the season. And they don't have a conference championship to play for, so the only thing they can play against really is themselves, and that's who they have to beat. And so I do like those picks. This is First and Cam. Thank you for watching our weekly betting episode. Check us out next Monday. We're recovering week 7 of college football. Please make sure you like and subscribe to this channel. It helps us out. Keep this thing moving. My name is Cameron. Thank you to my co-host Evan for this lovely episode. We are out.